Good morning. How are we doing this morning? Psalm chapter 1 is where we're going to be. If you have a Bible, please turn there. I'm excited to jump into this series this summer. I'm excited that it's summer. I'm excited that the sun's out and we can wear shorts, okay? That's a good time of the year for me. There's a unique story back to the 14th century of a duke named Reynold III. And the thing that was unique about Reynold III is he had some very unhealthy habits, specifically related to how much food he would actually eat. And so he was often described by the people around him. He had a nickname based on being overweight. And at one point, his younger brother Edward tried to go and take the role of Duke from Reynold III. And at one point, Edward captured his older brother Reynold, and he didn't actually kill him. Instead, what he did is he took his brother, who was incredibly overweight, and he built a room around him. And he told this brother that freedom is yours. You can have your authority back. You can have your role as Duke back whenever you can fit through the normal size unlocked door. But then what happened is Edward gave his brother his favorite foods. And he gave him every day. He would send him to his room. And he could eat or choose not to eat. And every day he chose to eat more and more and more. And he would never fit through the door. And this was a 10-year experience for him until his younger brother Edward died in battle. And he was released from the room only to die 1 year later because of his weight. You see, here's what was true for Reynold III. He was a prisoner of his appetite. Patterns and habits are important in our life. He had unhealthy patterns that resulted in really difficult habits. The question that I want to wrestle with this morning is, what patterns of your life lead to healthy habits? What patterns of your life lead to healthy habits? What's the difference between the patterns of life and the habits of life? Listen, patterns of life actually create habits. And so let's define what patterns are and what habits are. Patterns are repeated sequences. That's what a pattern actually is. Patterns always lead to a destination. It's the path to the goal. Patterns are a process or a rhythm of decisions. But when we talk about habits, what we're talking about there is settled behaviors. They're settled behaviors. Habits are what you do without even thinking. They actually come natural to you. It's what you're most likely to do in your life. And why is it that we have the habits that we have? Listen, it comes down to one thing. The reason you have the habits that you have is strictly because of the reward that it gives you. Every habit gives us some kind of reward. And if the reward wasn't what we wanted, we would never actually have the habit. So what habits do you have in your life? In fact, the question I've been wrestling with all week is this: if my patterns and habits, if they never change for the rest of my life, if the patterns and habits that are in play in my life right now, if these are the ones that existed for the rest of my life, where would my life be in 3 months, 6 months, 10 years, 50 years from now? Where would your life actually be? If nothing changed in your patterns and habits, where would your marriage be? If nothing changed with your patterns and habits, where would your role as a parent actually be? Where would your work life be? Would you be healthy or unhealthy? What would your bank account look like? Patterns and habits. You see, if you hit your goals or miss your goals, it's going to be based on the patterns and habits you have in your life right now. And so if everything stayed the same, if nothing changed in your life, would you be encouraged or discouraged by where you would end up? Patterns or habits? You see, I think these patterns and habits have a direct effect on us physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And so they're incredibly important in our life. And so can I just be honest? Can we just agree that we all have habits that we love in our life, and we all have habits that we probably hate? We all struggle with that. We have things we love, And we have things that we would love to get rid of, things that we don't want to do anymore. And so what unhealthy habits need to change in your life? Psalm chapter 1 is where we're going to spend our morning as we wrestle with what patterns of your life lead to unhealthy habits. I'm going to make two 30,000-foot points, okay? 2 points that are about 30,000-foot views. So we're going to zoom out a little bit. And here's the first. Here's the first for us this morning. The unhealthy patterns cause your downward spiral. Unhealthy patterns cause your downward spiral. Let's read Psalm chapter 1 together. It says this: "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He's like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. And all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like the chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish." So here's the thing about Psalms chapter 1. Psalms 1 gives us two choices. It gives us two paths. It gives us two options in our life. And so here's option 1. Option 1 is the path that prospers. We can see the word in verse 3. Option 2 is the path that perishes. We see it in verse 6. Option 1 is the path that leads to eternal life. Option 2 is the path that leads to eternal perishing. Option 1 is the path that results in great reward. Option 2 is the path that results in great consequences. Option 1 is a blessed path. Option 2 is a cursed path. But please notice that both of these paths, both of these choices speak to our eternity. There are only two options, and here's the observation we can make, that every one of us is going to spend eternity somewhere. The question is just where. And so Psalm chapter 1 is a black and white text. There is no gray here. I know that we love to make other options, specifically in our culture here in West Michigan. Well, God, if I can do what I want to do, but go to church every week, will that be good? Or God, if I behave really well, will that be good enough for me to create this third option and just do what I want to do? But please no, there's only two options. And so no matter how many options you attempt to create, every life is going to come down to two. One that will perish and one that will prosper. And so as you survey the habits and patterns of your life, where are you actually headed? Which habits and patterns best describe the life you're living now? And if your habits and patterns actually never changed, what would be the trajectory of your life? And when you look at the trajectory of your life, are you encouraged by it, or does it bring you to your knees? If your eternity was determined by your current patterns and habits, what is the trajectory showing you? Patterns and habits. I want you to notice the first phrase of verse 1. It says this. It says, "Blessed is the man." I want to start out in Psalm chapter 1 this morning giving you hope. Giving you hope. Because I want you to know the Bible teaches us there's only one man who perfectly chose the path of blessed. And his name is Jesus. And Jesus left his heavenly throne to bring heaven down to earth through the virgin birth. He lived the perfect, sinless life. He died a sinner's death. He was then buried in a grave. And 3 days later, we know from his death, he rose again. And sometime later, he ascended back to heaven. So here's the point. Without Jesus living his perfect life, there is no blessed life. That what we want to do is eternally connected to the work that he's already done. He shapes this life we're going to talk about this morning. But make note that if Jesus didn't live that perfect life, there is no other option for you and I but eternal perishing. That's all there would be. And because the mission of Jesus was successful, right? We now have a second option. We have another path. We have another choice. And if Jesus didn't fulfill everything we're seeing in Psalm chapter 1 this morning, all you'd be left with is your effort to try to please a holy God. That's all you would have in your life. It all comes down to two options: perish or prosper. But here's the point. Because Jesus is our hope, let's jump into the text and look at what it says. Blessed is the man, it says, who walks not in the counsel of the wicked. Listen, the blessed man, the blessed person, their life is going to be defined in Psalm 1 first by what they do not do, and then secondly by what they do. All right, that's how the life is going to be broken down right here in the text this morning. And so how habits and patterns are formed are going to be present right here in Psalm chapter 1. And I want to highlight three words that we just read. I want to highlight the word walk, the word counsel, and the word wicked. The word walk references your behavior. The word walk references how you actually live your life, which means this, that every single one of us is on a spiritual journey somewhere. In fact, it's possible that the physical steps we take in life can actually affect our spiritual life as well. And so the word walk actually references the places that we make frequent stops to, the places that we continue to visit. And ultimately, our walk is determined by the desires of our own hearts. And so as you think about your walk in life, are you walking the steps that you're taking? Are they encouraging your intimacy with Jesus or robbing your intimacy with Jesus? Walking. Here's the second word, it's the word counsel. And here's the point. Who you get counsel from really matters in your life, friends. It really, really matters. So is the counsel that you receive in your life, is that leading you to a place where it's motivating your intimacy with Jesus or robbing your intimacy with Jesus? I can't tell you how many times being a pastor for 17 years now, I've seen people who profess to know Christ walk away from Christ, and guess what they do? Is they find a crowd, they surround themselves with people who want to get after the same agenda they do, to give themselves permission to live their life how they want to live their life. I've seen it over and over and over again. Have you seen that? Who you get counsel from matters. Do the voices that surround your life, do they motivate your intimacy with Jesus or rob your intimacy with Jesus? It's incredibly important, the voices that are around us. And so if you have an anti-gospel pattern in your life that has been set by an anti-gospel agenda, here's what will happen, is you will surround yourselves with people who have the same anti-gospel agenda to motivate you and encourage you to live your life however you want to live it. You can find those people, they exist. And honestly, they exist in the church. But then we get to the word wicked. And the word wicked appears a lot in Psalms, and it appears a lot in Proverbs, which are ultimate books of great wisdom. And here's the point of the wicked. The word wicked references the idea of people who are against God. So can I just highlight the truth that we see wickedness everywhere in our world? We see wickedness everywhere in our world, right? With people who want to undo God's vision for all things, right? Wickedness is present as we see people want to undo, our world wants to undo God's vision for marriage. They want to undo God's vision for gender. They want to undo God's vision, right, for life. And we have things with abortion that are still happening in our world. All of these things that actually break God's heart and are not his vision for what he would have for the creation that he made. Wickedness, it's present everywhere. So who do you get your counsel from? Where are you walking? Because what we're going to see is this is only the tip of the iceberg of the downward spiral of sin. Look at verse 1 again with me. It says, who walks not in the counsel of the wicked. It says, nor stands in the way of sinners. Listen, someone who's standing, it actually references someone who's more settled than walking. While walking references frequent stops to actually sin, standing references habitual sin problems. And honestly, the way that we live our life, the walk that we're on, it's defined by life choices. And not all of it's bad. Like, you've had to make decisions on where to live. You're going to rent an apartment, or you're going to buy a house. Have fun buying a house today, right? You make choices on who you're gonna marry, who you're not gonna marry. You make choices on the job to accept or not accept. You make choices on the vacation to go on or not go on. All of it is up to you. You get to decide what you want to do, which then means on our spiritual walk, not all choices are bad. We can make good choices. But please know, this downward spiral of sin actually exists because sin is actually never satisfied. And if sin goes unchecked, it's gonna take you farther than you want to go. So here's what will happen. You're gonna be on a walk. We're gonna make frequent stops to places, potentially places of sin. And as you keep walking to those places, eventually you're going to stop and you're going to stand. You're going to develop this new pattern, this settled position of standing with and in sin, which then means this, that standing is a declaration of allegiance. It's a settled position. How many of you have been asked to share your settled position on something in this world? You have a stance, right? You have a stance on politics. Are you Republican, are you Democrat, or are you something else? You have a stance on all cultural issues. You have a stance on all sorts of things that are happening in our world. The question is this, does the stance that you have actually align with the Bible? Because here's the truth, I have an opinion on stuff, you have an opinion on stuff, we all have our opinions on stuff. Here's the thing though, it's actually only God's opinion that really matters on most things. So is God the one who's formulating your stance? Or is it you who's living your life how you want to actually live it? You see, we see, I think for many people have a flexible stance, meaning this, that whatever and whoever they're around, that's gonna dictate the kind of stance that they're going to have. So are your stances biblically motivated? Or your stances change with the times? Standing where you're at is incredibly important. We then see the word sinners. And here's the thing about sinners, and this is why it's dangerous of surrounding ourselves with people who don't care at all about what God thinks. Because sinners actually want to minimize what God thinks, they want to elevate what they think. Minimize what God's word says, elevate what they actually think and what they actually want to do. So are you standing with sinners, friends? Is that where your devotion lies? With the ever-changing world? Or is your life aligned with the Word of God? So we're talking about walking and we're talking about standing, but I want you to know the progression, downward spiral, it's still going. It's onward. Look at what it says again in verse 1. Who walks in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, but then it says this, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. Again, sin starts small, but it's actually never satisfied. And it goes like this. You start walking in places you shouldn't walk. Then you'll start standing in places you shouldn't stand in. And then eventually you're going to start sitting in places you should never take a seat in. And when we sit with the scoffers, here's what the text is helping us understand, that we are in agreement with those who are against God. Scoffers are haters of God. They're hostile towards God. Scoffers view themselves like a judge in their courtroom holding their own gavel, who have all the authority to decide what's true and not true. That's what they're gonna do. They have the authority, you don't, they do. The final authority on all things. And they're gonna go against God, and they're mockers of God and God's people. So can I just make an observation at this point in the text? What we've seen so far, apart from Jesus, this downward spiral is the very thing that is natural to you and I. This is what comes easy. This is what will actually be true of our life. If apart from Christ, this is all we actually get. You can see this in movies, right? Maybe you've seen the movie Catch Me If You Can before, right? I think his name was Frank Abagnale Jr., right? Forging checks, true story, right? Forging check after check after check over years and years and years until he found himself in a spot where he was caught. And we love it for entertainment, but I just don't think it's very funny when it's our life. This is the thing that is natural to us. So where does this lead us? Look at verse 4. It says, the wicked are not so, but are like the chaff that the wind drives away. Verse 5, therefore the wicked will not stand in judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. The end of verse 6, but the way of the wicked will perish. And so where does this downward spiral end? Listen, it starts with us being chaff that the wind drives away. Now, we could spend a lot of time talking about that, but here's the point. It's worthless and has zero value. Which then means that walking and standing and sitting is the fast track to frustration and emptiness. And then we get to the ultimate warning, and that is this: the wicked will actually perish. So let me tell you again, this is what's natural for you and I. This is the natural route we would be on if it wasn't for Jesus. And so then we can make this observation from Psalm chapter 1, that sin will take you further than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, and cost you more than you want to pay. Every time, this is the story. Every human being apart from Christ, this is what we get. And so every habit you have in your life comes down to the reward that you love. It's giving you some kind of reward, and you love it, therefore you give your time and your energy to it. And ultimately it comes down to some kind of comfort, control, significance. We can talk about security, we can talk about happiness or enjoyment, or maybe it's a stress reliever for you. But of the habits that you have in your life, what's the reward that you love? Name it. What's the reward that you love? I mean, you're given so much ample time to it, so what is that thing that it's giving you that you love with all your heart? Why do we choose the patterns and habits again that we have? Simply because we love it. We love it. Why would we develop new patterns and habits? Simply because we want to love something else. Why would someone develop the patterns and the habits of dieting, of exercise, and getting better sleep? Why would they do that? The answer is the reward of being healthy, right? And some of you have great patterns with that. Others of you probably don't. We have patterns and we have habits based on the reward. Why did you marry the person that you married? For most of you in the room, it simply comes down to, this is the deepest friendship you've ever had, and you want to spend your life with that person because you get to give them something and they give you something, and there's this relational connection that's incredibly incredible. You love it. You have to have it, so you married them. You're giving your life to them. But notice the reward, the payment for the wicked. Notice the reward for sinners and scoffers. It's, you will perish. The answer is this: it's eternal hell. And so we're seeing then the goal of sin in your life. Do you know what the goal of sin in your life is? Because we don't think about the goal of what the enemy has for us. The goal is your eternal ruin. It's your eternal destruction. Like, that's the plan of sin. And so what then is the reward that your habits produce in your life? Here's the second thing we'll see in this text this morning, is that healthy patterns actually create upward growth. It says, back in verse 1, it says, blessed is the man. Then it says this, who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But check out verse 2. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. Now let me be clear, let me back out again. The blessed life is defined by the person of Jesus. If you know him, he changes everything in your life. And when you know Jesus, it's such a blessed position because your eternal destination is not determined by what you do and don't do, but it's determined by what he's ultimately done. And that blessed role, that blessed position is the place where Jesus continues to throw at you his love and his care and his favor on you. Do you recognize that in your life? So can I make just an observation, spiritually speaking? It takes something supernatural for us to change our spiritual habits. It takes something supernatural in our hearts and our lives. It requires someone greater than us. So think about the love that sinners get from a holy God. Like, that alone should motivate change in our hearts and in our lives. It should motivate to say, you know what? I really want my life to align with what God would have for me. But look at verse 2 again. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. His delight is in the law of the Lord. can I be honest with you as a pastor? I don't always delight in the Lord. Do you? I mean, to delight in the Lord is to be captivated by him. To delight in the Lord is for every moment of your life, for you to say, he's what's most important. I treasure him more than I treasure anything else. And I'm not always there. I'm not always in that position. And if I could be even more vulnerable, I would say this. There's times in my life as a pastor that I want the people of Redemption Church to do something that I don't always want to do. And I think this is called being human. I don't always delight in the Lord, do you? This is why I'm so grateful that even when I don't feel like pursuing Jesus, he is still on a crazy pursuit of me. And that's what keeps me coming back to him. Have you experienced that cycle in your heart and in your life? And here's what the struggle is with the world. The world offers some kind of delight, because if it didn't, we wouldn't struggle. If sin didn't give us some kind of delight, we would never give in to sin. It's offering something to you that we want to experience it. We want to have it. Here's the problem. You can't actually obtain it. You can't hold it. You can't actually keep it. It's always fleeting, and we keep trying over and over and over again to find that thing that will fill that void in my life, and it will never happen in the world. It'll never happen. But here we see that Jesus is guaranteeing an eternal delight in those who meditate on his law. So I guess the question is, what do I do if I don't always delight in God? What's the plan? Because just like there's a downward spiral of sin, there's actually an upward growth that we're talking about here. There's a process that you need to develop to delight in God. Just like there's a process for us to go downward in sin. It's a process to get there. So how do we delight in God? I want to give you three things. Here's the first. Listen, it takes discipline. You want to delight in God? It's going to start with a discipline. Can we just acknowledge that all discipline takes work? You agree? All discipline takes work. If there was no discipline involved, right? If discipline was easy, we'd all be ripped and incredible, you know? But discipline is difficult. And that's the point with discipline. You have to give time to something. And this is what it takes. It takes effort, it takes time, and it takes consistency. I know new patterns and habits can take weeks, even months to form, but if you want to delight in Jesus, it's going to start with discipline. And if you never develop a discipline, hear me, you will never, ever delight in Jesus. Discipline's the first step. Here's the second step to delight in Jesus. It's desire. It's desire. Listen, if you form a discipline of spending time with the Lord, you will eventually form a desire for him. And what that means is this, is that he actually starts to formulate the lens through which you look at life. That how you live your life with this desire, you actually want to know what God thinks. You actually want to care about what his word actually says. And because you've been spending time with him with this discipline that took work, and sometimes you don't even desire it, but you do it anyway because you want to desire him. We learn through that our heart will start to align with his just a little bit more. He'll give me perspective on what matters most in my life. He'll give me wisdom that I didn't have before because I didn't have a discipline and I certainly didn't have a desire. But after you form a discipline, you form a desire. And after you form a desire, friends, then you arrive at delight. At delight. Listen, you know that you have a delight in Jesus when he matters more to you than anything in this world. Now let me tell you this, that sounds like perfection, and I'm gonna tell you right now, this is not about you being perfect. This is about God being good and you resting in that presence. He's good. And he wants you to spend time with him. He wants you to be with him. And all of a sudden, we'll start to have this delight that we've never actually had before. And I don't know if you've experienced it in your life. I feel like this delight is a little bit like this, right? I have it, then I don't. I have it, then I don't. Or it's kind of like this, right? It's not perfect. It's not a perfect trajectory. It's a pursuit. And sometimes it goes down, and sometimes it comes up. I've had seasons of my life when I've been more on fire for Jesus than others. Anyone else would say that? So know this. He's not asking for perfection from you. He knows that you're broken. He knows the things you struggle with, and in spite of all that he knows, he's still good to you. But he wants friendship with you. So how do you know if you have a delight? Jesus matters more than anything. You also know you have a delight when you're compelled by his word to spend time with him more than you are to actually skip being in his word. So again, it's not perfection, it's a rhythm. It's this rhythm of life that we actually develop, and here's how you ultimately know you delight in God, is you actually start to love what God loves. That God's convictions become your convictions, that God's will becomes your will, that God's opinions become your opinions, that God's plan becomes your plan. Delight in him. So can I just make the observation that there are 0 shortcuts to delight? That's discouraging, isn't it? There are 0 shortcuts to delighting in the Lord. It takes effort, and it takes work. Some of you might say, Josh, I don't have hours a day to spend with the Lord. I'm not a pastor. I'm not going to sit in my office all day and just read the Bible. You guys only work 1 day a week. Can I just be honest with you? I'm telling myself this too. We always have time for what matters most to us. Every single time it comes down to what I want and the reward I think I'm going to get. We always have time for what matters most. And so notice what the text says in verse 2, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and then it says this, and on his law the blessed man or woman meditates day or night. Notice it doesn't say he prays day or night, he worships day or night, he goes to church day or night. No, he says he meditates day and night. So it's almost like God wants us to focus on this. And it's almost like God has such a high view of this that he's bringing you and I to it full circle over and over and over again. And so here's what he's saying. I have such a high view of the Word because the Word is encompassed in the person of Jesus. And so I want you to come to the Word. I want you to see him. I want you to experience him. And when you do that, what will happen is that you'll then have a high view of me and of the Word. He's brilliant in his game plan. Which then means that meditation is to the soul what digestion is to the body. Did you see how much God is asking you to meditate on his word? Did you see the verse? And on his law, he meditates 5 minutes a day. Is that what it said? No, it says that he meditates day and night. Well, Josh, again, I don't have 8 hours a day. No, here's what I'm saying. You could take one verse. You could take one attribute of God. You could take one thing, right, that pricks your hard heart by the gospel, and you could spend time processing that one verse, that one thought all day long. That's what it means to meditate with the Lord. You're processing it over and over and over again, looking at it from different angles. God, help me see this truth in a deeper light and in a deeper way. It doesn't require you to be on your knees for 8 hours a day. You can do that when you're in the car or in the shower or driving your kids to school or sitting in your cubicle or serving patients, whatever you do. Another transparent moment as a pastor. I can be up here preaching and watch someone walk out. This isn't to embarrass anyone here. And I can think about, what are they doing? Are they getting a donut right now? While I'm talking to you about Jesus. We can meditate all day long. And that's the challenge of the text. That's what he's asking us to do. It gives us the picture of chewing the cud. If you've ever owned cows before, which I haven't, I like to eat cow. I don't want to own a cow, okay? But if you've ever had a cow before, or you know anything about animals, they chew the cud, meaning they chew their food, they swallow it, they throw it back up in their mouth, they chew it again, and then they swallow it, right? It's the picture of meditating on the gospel. Again, this takes incredible intentionality. Can I just tell you, you don't end up delighting in the Lord on accident. Now check out verse 3 with me quick. Verse 3 says, he is like a tree planted by streams of water and yields its fruit in season, and its leaf does not wither, and all that he does, he prospers. So we see this biblical example of planting. Here's the question: who does the planting? The answer is the Lord. The Lord does the planting of you by the stream of water. And what observations can we make about the tree? Listen, the tree will never wither, no matter how hot the sun gets, no matter the season that tree faces, because its roots are deep in the gospel of Jesus. It will always prosper. It'll always give fruit in season. Here's the problem I have with the last phrase of verse 3. And all that he does, he prospers. Here's my struggle with that phrase. Humanly speaking, living in this world in 2022, it seems to be untrue. It seems like the world always wins and God's people always lose. We have a world that's against us. Yet here we are as God's people trying to pursue him and be faithful and faithful and faithful. God, when are you going to come through? Like, you ever have that, or is that just me? The world seems to always win. Actually, God, if I could just say what you say in your word, in fact, the world is the one that's actually prospering, not the church. That's how I feel. Here's what the text is saying. The world may prosper today. The person that's against you may prosper today. They may prosper tomorrow. They may prosper in 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. But know this: when time is up, they will no longer prosper, they will perish. And the text we see here in verse 5, it says, the wicked will not stand in judgment. They might stand now, they're going to fall on their face before holiness, and it's going to be done. So there's a promise for you and I that we have to rally our hearts around, speak the truth of the gospel to ourselves, to say, you know what, man, this is going to be hard. This is a difficult journey. It's actually not easy, but God is absolutely good. And so our gospel takeaway this morning is this. I want to give you good news. Because of the gospel, it's never too late to change your unhealthy habits. Are you hearing that? You might have come in here today with a bunch of baggage, and I want you to hear this. Because of Jesus, it's never too late to change your unhealthy habits. It's never too late. We all have habits and patterns in our life. We have habits and patterns in our marriage, habits and patterns in our parenting, habits and patterns with our work life and with our health and with our money. So here's what's true. Every habit or pattern you have in your life was formed by undiscipline or formed by discipline. That's how they got there. That's how you experienced it. And so here's the good news, just to hear it again. No matter the patterns or habits you have formed in your life, there's never a point of no return with Jesus. No matter how deep and far you think you've gone, you're not even walking, you're not even standing, you're sitting at the seat that you know you shouldn't be in. Listen, you can get up from the table and walk away. That's what this is telling you. There is hope in the person of Jesus. And so the question is, what habits need to die and what habits need to start? How do you kill a habit? Let me give you 4 things quick. All right, how do you kill a habit? Here's the first. Name the habit to change. Name the habit to change. Answer this question: why do you have the habit? Why do you have it? Is it to medicate some kind of pain? To provide some kind of comfort? To give some kind of high? To feel good in this life? To help you relax? To relieve your life of stress? Why do you have that habit in your life? Here's the second thing I would say. Identify the trigger. When are you most likely to give into that habit? Is it a location? A time? Is it when specific people are around you? Is it when you're most vulnerable? When you're tired? When you're exhausted? When you're busy? When are you most likely to give in? What's the trigger to say, oh, I gotta have that reward right now? Last, or thirdly, acknowledge the reward. And I want you to process this question. You think about the habits you have and the rewards that you receive. How long does that reward actually last? Because here's what Jesus is saying. There's actually something better. And I just want to tell you, be upfront and honest with you, battle with the world, battle with the flesh is a real thing. And we all have our own struggles, and we can list them all off, and we'd be embarrassed by them all. But I want you to understand something. The reason we battle with it is it actually does make us feel something. Here's the thing about following Jesus. He offers you no high. To say no to sin doesn't always feel good. But hear me, there is no guilt and no shame with him. And that's an ultimate reward for us, is that I'm free just to be in him. Here's the fourth step. Stop living isolated. Who needs to know about this habit that you want to change in your life? Surround yourself with those kinds of people. Jesus is offering you something better. Here's the point though. You cannot kill a habit without developing a new one. It requires something new. You have to replace that habit, the bad habit, the unhealthy habit, with one that's good, with one that's actually healthy. And so how do we do that? Quickly, we name 4 things. Name the habit you want to build in its place. Right? Name the habit you want to build in its place. Identify the motivation as to why you want that habit. Acknowledge the reward you know that habit will actually give you. And then surround yourself with a community that will encourage that habit to be built in your life. Listen, you were never created to live this life alone. Jesus has given you a community of people that want to rally around you in your brokenness and your goodness to make you more like him. So here's the point. We all have a habit that needs to go. And so what is it for you? Let me pray for us. Jesus, I want to thank you for your word and the opportunity to look at Psalm chapter 1, Lord. Lord, I see the downward spiral of sin there. I've experienced that in my own heart, my own life. And I see the work, Lord, that can be done to delight in you. So I just want to pray, Lord, for the people of Redemption Church, that we will be a people that love your word, that want to surrender our life to it. But Lord, I know it takes effort. It takes discipline. And so I pray, Lord, we can just be open and honest about our struggles. Lord, I know that you don't demand perfection, but I also know, Lord, that you want us to pursue you. And so will your pursuit of us, Lord, motivate us to want to fall on our face before you and to hear more about how you love us and how you care for us. We do love you, Jesus, in spite of our imperfections. And we thank you for grace that we can have every new day. In your name, amen.